Well, the chaotic lifestyle of an aquarist. So I was setting up my camera to record because I got something really exciting I want to show you guys today. But yeah, water happened all over the place because I'm trying to drain that tank right there. It's gonna get taken down, and since I need to take that down, the good thing means that something new is coming along its way, and I'm very, very excited to show you today's aquascape. So let me start out by just taking you into the living room here, which is where I do all of my magic. And I do believe that we can agree that this is a bit of a mess right now. I'm generally just so freaking messy when I'm working, but I need my mess in order to work properly. But this is my newest tank, and there's a lot of funny things to say about that. And one of those things being that this aquarium actually is a tank that didn't used to be this shallow. So the quick observer might notice here that this tank is looking, I don't know, a bit rough on the edges, especially if I could just, there. I feel like I've been doing YouTube for long enough to know how to use a gyroscope or whatever you call this thing for my camera, but I just don't. But if you look at these edges here, well, it's not the most pretty cut aquarium you've ever seen. Especially if we go over here, we're right about there. That's nothing short of a disaster. It is something that I have made nevertheless, and I'm quite proud of it. And the reason that I think this aquascape is so cool, by the way, this thing right here is going away because that thing is gonna be floating on its own. I think it's actually floating on its own already right now, but I just wanna support it for as long as possible until I completely fixate it. Right now, I came up with this clever solution because I thought that that was gonna be enough, but apparently not, because the wood up here is super heavy, so it actually tilts over. So I found a suction cup, and you can just see it down here. I found a suction cup, and I kind of got one of the tree branches into the suction cup. So it's to some extent actually holding that piece right there right now. But what I'm hoping is that once that root gets wet, well, then that root is also going to be more heavy at the bottom, and then it's going to be heavier than it is at the top. At least that's what I'm thinking, but I don't know if it's like that. So the reason that I wanted to make this aquascape is because the aquascape that I just showed you before has been taken down. There's no longer an aquascape. There's just a mess of plants and nothing else. So we need something new. And this is exactly what we need, because this is my new 43 liters of shallow tank. This used to be a 54 liter, which I think for all of you American people is like 15 gallons or something. So this tank is also a custom made tank because I cut 5 centimeters off of it. And for you American people, I think that's like 2.2 inches, but I'm not entirely sure. So, you know, don't hate me for it if it's wrong, because I do not know my conversions at all. I'm literally just throwing some random off of my chest here, and I'm hoping that it's correct. So I painted the back of it because this tank hopefully will have a lot of focus on the fish that's gonna be in there. I'm actually not sure what we're gonna be putting in there yet. I think my puffer is gonna go in here, but I'm not too sure if it's gonna be too small. So I might be, you know, need to get a new tank for that eventually. It's also, at least from what I'm thinking right now, gonna be a brackish tank. And I have not done a brackish tank before. It's gonna be a fun little experiment, and I don't see a lot of people doing brackish tanks. So it's also gonna be something new and different. I'm just gonna move that plant out of the sun because I don't want it to dry out or anything like that, even though it is stuck inside of that closed container, so it shouldn't dry out. But nevertheless, you never know. Cannot be too safe with your plants. You don't wanna lose them because they are so expensive. So hey, hit me up with a sponsorship, Tropica, if you wanna. I'm just kidding, but you know, it would help me out greatly if you guys would just drop a like on this video to see the finished result of this tank later. And if you subscribe, well, then you'll be ready the day that I release the video of the updated result of this, if there will ever be one. Unless this is a massive failure, but I don't think it will be. So I'm just gonna continue emptying my tank in there, and once I'm done with that, then we can move that tank in there. But I need some plants in that before we move it. So I'm just gonna empty that so I can move it, and then I can take plants out as well. So that's actually pretty clever. And then we're gonna get back to this tank in here, and then we can plant that, which is gonna be exciting. So let's just get that done. Wait, I guess I have to finish my sentence and then snap. So let's get that done. All right, so I'm now arranged with my new aquascape here, and we're gonna plant this, but before we do so, one of the main reasons that I'm also taking down the old aquascape is because it is so full of algae that it's just not worth it for me to keep it going anymore. So while aquascaping that thing has been a true joy, well, it's just time to try something new and finally combat the algae, because it was blackbeard algae, and that thing is just a pain to get rid of. There's just no way that that thing is not gonna take over your entire tank unless you catch it as soon as you start seeing it, and sadly, I just didn't. So it is slowly taking over, and that's why we're gonna just do a few things, which is also why we have 2 bowls in front of me here. because one is a bleach solution and the other one is plants that need a bleach dip. With me, I also got some things to rinse here afterwards, some dechlorinator, and hopefully this is gonna work. But I feel like we're just gonna start throwing them into the bleach dip and then we're gonna start planting this tank. I'm using a solution with 1 part chlorine and 19 parts water. It's important that you don't mix it any stronger because it's gonna make the leaves simply decay and kill them. So once you dip, you gotta pay attention to what kind of leaves you are or what kind of plant you're dipping. So I'm dipping hygrophila here, which has some delicate thin leaves. You do not want to dip those longer than 60 seconds. I'm also dipping some cryptos. I don't want to dip those for longer than 60 seconds as well. You can also dip something like Anubias and stuff, and I'm also going to be doing that. And those can handle up to 90 seconds because they have just a bit thicker and stronger leaves as well as their rhizomes. So they can take a bit more, but make sure not to dip any delicate plants for more than 60 seconds when you do it. Now, it's also worth mentioning that I'm super irresponsible here and I'm not using gloves. Please, when you handle chlorine, please use gloves because that thing is just so harsh on your skin. So if you don't, you simply risk ruining your hands. So use gloves even though I don't do it. So that is the bleach dip done. Now, besides the bleach dip, you'll probably still see that there will be algae on your plants. And you might also see that some of the leaves are starting to decay and whatnot, but this is just sort of what it's like to do a bleach dip. It will happen. But what I will advise you to do now is that look for the most healthy, there we are, leaves that you have on here. So if you see anything, and don't be gentle, because if you really want to reset your aquarium, if you had some sort of an algae outburst or something that you just couldn't get rid of, there's no point taking any chances because your plants will recover. If there's anything you can guarantee that they will, it is recover. But I actually see that this has reacted very nicely to it. I see some dark spots where the BBA used to be, and it's definitely not there anymore. But basically what happens when I'm cutting off all of these leaves is that we are promoting growth of new healthy plants. So there is literally no downsides to you trimming away all of the bad stuff in your plants. So just go nuts, do it, and make sure that you get all of those bad looking leaves. You really don't want to bring over any of this to your new aquarium if you are experiencing any algae issues. But hey, this is looking very good. And while we're at it, I'm also gonna just take the opportunity here to split some of my plants because some of them have just grown so beautifully. So for example, this Crypto Vasili here has some very, very nice new growth to it as well. And the good thing about all of these new shots or these new sprouts or whatever you want to call them is that they're all looking so much better than the old ones. Because if there's one thing that algae like better than anything, it's old decaying leaves, because that is nutrients for your algae. So another tip, if you do want to see if you can reduce algae in your tank, trim your plants often and early before they start getting really bad and really decayed, because at some point they're gonna hit a stage where they're just not good anymore, and then you're not gonna have lush looking plants and you're just gonna have algae all over the place. So honestly, I should just cut off all of the leaves on this one, but it's not really worth it. So I'm gonna keep these 3 because they actually look quite all right. Very good. So from that, we now have 1, 2, 3 Vasili. And oh, I don't know where to put these. These get like semi-tall, so I don't want them too much in the front, but I want them where you can see them still. I'm thinking that, okay, first of all, we really need to get rid of this root here. There we are. So I'm thinking if we put the Vasili over here, I'm just gonna lay them down for now because I don't really know where I want them. But I'm thinking over here will be quite good. And now you see me trimming my cryptos here, and especially with cryptos, when we're speaking of removing leaves and the such, don't fear that you're moving too many leaves from your crypto, because cryptos don't react well to getting moved at all. So regardless if you just trim off 1 or 2 leaves, or if you trim off 5, 6, it's gonna lose a bunch of leaves no matter what. They often do that. It's not something that will happen, but it happens every once in a while, and you might as well, if you see any bad leaves, take them away. So this one is actually looking quite all right, so I'm not gonna do anything to that. And I'm thinking we'll have this one. They're quite long, and I'm thinking the flow is gonna come from this way. So actually, I think it would be kind of neat if we plant those over here, because they will get like this wavy feel to it when they flow through the water here. That's gonna look grade A. And I'm just rethinking that already because I'm staring at my hygrophila right here, which we also need, and that's gonna get quite big too. So if we put that here instead, then we're still gonna have that float on there. We're gonna have to trim that one a lot because in the old tank, it's completely taken over the entire tank and it's killing flow and stealing just about all of the nutrients in the tank. So we don't want that. So now let's see. This Anubias has reacted quite well to the dip as well. And This one does have some bad leaves, so we're just gonna take those away too. So while it does pain me, this one has, to some extent, leftover BBA on all leaves. So I'm gonna throw that one away because I don't wanna take any chances in the new tank here. It's simply not worth it for me. And then speaking of Anubias petite, just look at the size of this, literally smaller than my finger. Some of these can be so small and so delicate, but actually the Anubias is a very sturdy plant, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about the Anubias getting any damage from this dip. While normal, like delicate plants, I wouldn't dip them for longer than a total of 60 seconds at most. But the Anubias can easily go for around 90 seconds without getting any damage from it, so don't be too afraid to dip your Anubias. It kind of depends, like how many leaves you should remove kind of depends on how keen you are to really get rid of the algae problem. Since this is a new tank and since the fight against BBA has just been a pain, I'm not really willing to take many chances. So I'm actually just scraping this leaf because I think I see just a few leftover algae there, but they should all be gone now, just to make sure that we get as much of it off as possible. Now, I am to some extent also trying to just work against time here because can't leave our plants out forever. So we are eventually gonna have to finish off this project. But hey, this one is looking good too. So a couple of these I actually moved just some days ago over to a different tank, and I don't know what's wrong with that one tank. I feel like they've just gotten too good of a grip on the tank. Otherwise, I don't really know because I've tried just about anything. To my understanding, BBA is mostly caused by bad CO2 levels. This can either be fluctuating levels or low levels or whatever, but the tank has just been running with a CO2 injection and has had a stable level of it. Some would call it like in the mid-range of not too high, not too low. So on the CO2 levels, it's in my opinion been quite decent, but there's just been such a severe outburst of BBA that I think at the end of the day that is the reason that has happened, though I am not sure. Also some beautiful Bucephalandra here, which is really not looking good either. But I need to save this because I don't know, I'm just a sucker for Bucephalandra, so I need those. So I'm gonna remove every single bad leaf I see and just save whatever can be saved, just so that we have something to plant. And it's gonna look amazing in this tank, so we definitely need to save some of it. And I think that's about it too. Right, so with these, my plan is that we're gonna see if we can have these sort of grow on all of our little rocks here and there. So if you can just shove these in here well, and I'm thinking we can have one here too. So I kind of want to leave them in bunches so that it looks like they filled out the area naturally, rather than just random placements. Just twisting the roots here a bit, just to see if I can put those a little bit more tightly together. One here is a nice little one with just 2 leaves on it. We're gonna leave that there. And then I'm hoping that these are gonna attach themselves to our rocks here. Right, and then for the Bucephalandra, I actually kind of want to see if we can get it on the root here somehow. Now, I'm not by any means squeezing that under there. I'm just trying to get the root stuck just enough so that it's gonna stay there when we get water inside of this tank. Right, so I'm actually pretty confident about the position of my cryptos here. So I'm just gonna start planting them now. And we just want to make sure that we get these nice and deep down in here and get all of the roots so they don't float up when we start filling this with water. Now, in case you're wondering about the layout that I've made here, I tried to make it in a way so that we're gonna have good flowing water that's not gonna get disrupted by either plants or decoration, because I think that's partially why the old tank was heavily attacked, because the levels of CO2 would in specific areas be very bad because it all got trapped in one corner because of the size of the hygrophila in the tank. I kind of want to try to avoid that this time. So with the setup that we've made here, the water is going to be output from over here where it's going to flow, hopefully hit around here, flow underneath the rock or the wood here as well around, and you're going to have some open space over here where there won't be anything obstructing the water flow, to just make sure that nothing is gonna get in the way there. So that is the cryptos planted over there. Then we're gonna take the other cryptos right here, which is I think this is the Venti Brown. I'm not sure about it, but I honestly kind of forget, because I think we have 5 different total species of cryptos in my tanks at the moment. And then at some point, I just forget. I am only human after all. So just gonna get that in here. There we are, that's all of those planted. And I see that those leaves are drying out a little bit, so we want to get some water to them quickly. But before we do that, we also have a different crypto here, which is it Pavula? I'm not actually sure about which crypto this is, but we're gonna plant it. And I think, you know what, I actually quite like over here. So let's go for that. And we should have 2 of those, but I don't know where I put the other one. It's right there, good. And then hopefully with time, this is also gonna spread and just throw out a side shoot or 2 that's gonna look even more amazing down here. So there we are. Those should be rooted well enough to not go and do crazy stuff. And now I just found an extra little of the Vasili, so we're just gonna plant that over here. You know what? Like I said, cryptos are not very keen on getting moved at all, so I'm not scared about removing roots and the like, because those roots will very often die anyway. So that's about all that we had from here. So let's take a look at the other stuff that we had, which is this Hygrophila. And this is the one that I told you about that completely took over the tank. This has now also been dipped. So I'm just gonna sit down again and see if we can find any leaves with algae on it. And if we can, we also have some yellow leaves here. We don't want those. Then we have some broken leaves. We don't want those. And finally, we're left with a somewhat healthy looking plant, considering that it's just been bleach dipped. And then we're gonna plant those in this corner right here behind the tree root, because this plant is growing very fast and it gets very big. So I don't see a reason to have this in the and I don't want to have this like just in the middle of everything, because it's going to be way too dominant. So I'm going to leave it there. And then I'm going to have to remember to trim that plant often, because otherwise it's going to take over. And since I'm going to be quite strict on the trimming, I am going to plant quite a few stems, because I still want to get that bushy feel. And this plant is actually very good at doing that. It doesn't require a lot of light on any of the leaves really. As long as we just make sure to trim the top off often, then it's going to keep the leaves at the bottom, and it's going to get a very nice bushy with some decently long leaves still. There is a broken leaf, so we're just going to take that away, and we're going to plant the last stem. And then we have some of these Starogens here, which I actually did not intend to plant, but now that I have them here, I looked at them and I was like, these have actually gone to look pretty nice. And they didn't do that back when I bought them. They kept on losing their leaves because I threw them in a budget tank that didn't really have a good position for them, and then they ended up just too much in the dark. So the stems grew like crazy. The plant just didn't really flourish at all, which was a bit of a shame. So now they're gonna get a nicer position where they can easily thrive and grow. And I'm thinking if we plant those all the way in front, because we want that carpeting effect that they can put out. I really find it amazing when you hit a level in this aquarium where you've set up a few tanks and you've seen those tanks grow sufficiently that you can now just start harvesting old plants and put them in your new tanks. I'm really liking that. But it hasn't really stopped me from still purchasing just a few new plants. Oh, and here's a teeny tiny Anubias that we almost forgot. So that one is gonna get a special position right there, if it wants to stay there, that is. There we go, beautiful. So for this tank, I had 3 different plants that I really want. I actually only had 2, but I ended up grabbing 3 because it was cheap. So first of all, right here, we have a Pogostemon helferi. I don't know if you guys can see it, but now you can. And we're just gonna give that a wash because this is a 1-2 grow. So that thing will have some growth media there that we don't want to bring over to the tank. Oh, and this is the pain of splitting these plants, especially if these 1-2 grow. The good thing about them is that they grow a lot. The bad thing about it is that I always get so nervous when I have to split them because I'm afraid that I'm gonna cut all of the plants and ruin the entire look. But I'm really just trying to divide it here without destroying too much. I think I managed to get a single cutting right here. And I want these to just sort of grow in between the rocks, like that. Another cool thing I heard about this plant is that it can actually grow on trees and stuff as well. So I'm actually gonna leave just a sprout right there. And let's go see what others we can find. Now, when I make tanks, I like to have like just 1, maybe 2 plants that kind of just show up randomly, that's not really placed in a pattern, because I feel like it gives it sort of this wild look to it. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and just add a few of these Pogostemon helferi shuts or sprouts or whatever you want to call them, just randomly around the tank. And then if I don't like it later on, well, then I can always remove it. So the camera died while I was unpacking one of the plants, but I kind of got a little bit more done. And then I also filled in some sand just to show what this was gonna look like. But the only thing you really missed is that I, at the front here, installed some microsorghum, and I also put some on the back of the root here as well, because it is a plant that will attach to roots and rocks and all that stuff. And also, yes, it is a plant with a rhizome, and no, I didn't bury it into the substrate. It's merely just hanging onto it, and if everything goes well, then the rhizome is gonna grow up the root there, but we're gonna have to see how that goes. And then finally, I got some rotala here, and I don't really know why I got this, but they had a discount and, you know, 3 plants for the price of 2. So I figured that I might as well just go ahead and buy the 3rd one and get the discount, why not? So we have some rotala at the end here, and I figured it would be a nice touch to our aquarium, but this is not a very healthy plant, which is actually a bit of a shame. I mean, I guess that's the reason why we had a sale. So we're gonna go ahead and plant that over here in the corner. And that is actually all of the planting done. So since this is looking kind of boring, I kind of just want to bring this into where it's supposed to be, and then we can get some proper shots of this. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and move it.